Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, serial technology entrepreneur, a guy who's launched 30 companies, had 20 of those fail, but 10 of those I scaled to success. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach you how you turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software played a defining role in every win. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We're a US-based company that has software development teams in Latin America and the US, and we help scale existing engineering teams. And today I am joined by Diamond Bishop, who is an engineering and AI leader at a little company that most in our industry have heard of called Datadog. Diamond has worked at marquee companies like Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta. He even was co-founder of a company that was acquired by Datadog. So lots of good stuff to talk about. Diamond, welcome, my friend.
Hey, happy to be here.
If you would, and I'm sure I glanced over it quickly. I don't want to steal any thunder. Walk our listeners through the journey of your career.
Absolutely. I like to say I've been working to build AI friends for about 15 years or so. I've been working in the AI or machine learning space basically since grad school. Lockheed paid for my grad school while I was working for them, and I was doing machine learning work back then. And really the last couple of years, I've been focusing a lot on how do we use AI assistants to augment what you're doing or to help you out. I got to work on the launch of Alexa back in the day for Amazon, the launch of Cortana for Microsoft. You might remember a little thing called Windows Phone. Unfortunately, that one, petered out eventually, but that was a fun assistant to work on as well. And more recently was running my own startup that was building DevOps assistants and technologies that eventually got rolled into Datadog.
Awesome. All right. So if there's anyone listening to this podcast that doesn't know who Datadog is, I'm probably going to smack them. Certainly in the tech industry, you're well known, but from your perspective, give an overview of Datadog, please.
Sure thing. So Datadog's an observability and security platform. Really what we're there for is to help anyone doing the vast majority of DevSecOps tasks. We observe the stack that you're working on, help secure applications from code to cloud, act faster with automated workflows, kind of all end-to-end managing of your services and systems. A lot of what people use us for is really logging, metrics, traces, making sure they can debug their systems and run them at scale.
And there's certainly no doubt or no dispute that Datadog has become the gold standard in observability. And certainly I want to spend some time talking about how AI work is changing what you're doing with customers, how you guys are going about engineering. But first, if you would, sometimes in the tech space, we have lots of ups and downs, and even the best talent is focused on looking for the next opportunity or has companies that go out of business. And so you actually got into Datadog through an acquisition, which is very cool. And your previous roles that you've had at big tech, was it a matter of applying online, or did you have contacts and networks there that helped you kind of get through the door?
Yeah. I think it depends on the year, right? I'd say that for the vast majority of my previous roles, a lot of it has been because I was kind of so focused in a particular area. I would know people who are working in that area. AI was a pretty small field 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So you'd say, hey, I'm doing some work in this natural language processing space. I know the other 50 people working in that space. For example, for Cortana, I was doing natural language processing work in grad school, and I knew someone who was starting to spin up that project, and they're like, hey, we're going to do some dialogue management if you're interested in coming over. So I started talking to them and interviewed and, showed some of my work. And really the important part there was showing projects I've worked on because I was very junior at the time. For Alexa, a lot of my old coworkers moved from Cortana to Alexa because they were a very similar problem, and right across the pond, all in the Seattle area at the time, Redmond and Seattle. And I said, hey, I'd love to join. This is a really interesting new form factor. They couldn't tell me so much because we weren't quite at the public launch stage, but they could say, we're building a new assistant. It's going to be something that's in a new hardware device. It's not even in a phone, if you want to work in this space. And I interviewed at that point through connections. So a lot of it is about how do you actually kind of show your portfolio? How do you kind of build up projects that you like working on and show what you're good at?
And you certainly picked a good niche. to say the least. So thanks for sharing that. Tell us what you can, knowing Datadog's a public company, but some cool projects you guys are working on right now, pushing the envelope on things.
Absolutely. So a lot of where we started was this observability and metrics and DevOps kind of space. And now that we have a lot of these automation capabilities that are coming forward with AI, we've really found that there are many tasks that we can learn from how humans do them that we can start to automate. I like to say that we're building projects that make it so you have to use Datadog less as a human. I don't think our CEO likes it when I quite say it that way, but my goal in the AI teams I work with, our goal has always been, how do we figure out how to take away a lot of the work that you have to do to run your system and make it so you can go and spend your time doing the things you like doing. If you really like running commands inside of your servers and looking at logs, fine, go ahead, keep doing that. But if you're someone who wants to, tell one of our AI agents, hey, an alert went off, system's going down, can you figure out what's going wrong, and have them run off for you, or even do it while you're still asleep? That's the kind of things we're trying to do. So we have a whole team of AI agents that are working on different tasks across the board for automating them. And then I'm also working on a few more experimental projects that might say, if we know this much about your system, what can we do to make it even more resilient, basically, over time?
Gotcha. How, and Datadog, I believe, has right around 10,000 employees, certainly big tech company. How are engineering teams segregated within the company, and how does your AI unit integrate into it?
Yeah. So we have I think we have roughly 7,000 employees, 6,500, I think, or so right now. And we've been growing the last few years. Obviously, all those employees are not engineers. We have a smaller percentage of those that are engineers and scientists. But our organization is largely split by product. So there's groups that are focusing on logs or metrics, and then kind of sub project products within that. But that started to change when we started to bring in AI groups. It's kind of like, if you remember the early days of like mobile. In the very beginning, there was just a mobile team. So in the
Right.
very beginning, we had an AI team, and they're like the only central AI team. But then over time, you kind of have to figure out, like, how do I actually incorporate that expertise into my product team? Because even the product team shouldn't just throw it over the wall to another team and say, you figure out what AI means for our product. Because these people know their product, they know their customers, they know what they're doing. So we've started to not just have a central AI team, which we still do have a science team, a research team, but we also start to kind of put pods of people in each of these different teams that have AI expertise that can more work within those organizations. So my team, as of like, let's say, give you some history, about a year ago when we joined, I was running all of the AI agents groups and spinning up and hiring up people who have this expertise. And we were sitting alongside the research team. And then as of a few months ago, I really made the decision to split this team up and put them into each of the products, because I feel strongly that you shouldn't have a centralized AI group. You should have product teams that just figure out how to use AI agents for their particular tasks. And so I've split those up, tried to work my way out of a job. And now I'm focusing on more experimental groups that will spin up more 0 to 1 projects and then decide where those fit as we find traction.
Gotcha. So what is the work model at Datadog for engineers? Are you guys remote, hybrid, an office?
We're largely, I'd say, hybrid. Since we're a pretty large company, we have one main headquarters, which is in New York, and then we have a secondary large office that's in Paris. Both of our co-founders are French and have very strong ties back to the Paris engineering community. And so we have a pretty large talent pool there. And then beyond that, we have a series of other offices that we try as much as possible to keep teams kind of somewhat local. But we also have remote employees. My team, for example, my AI agents group, had mostly in New York, but we had a small pod in Seattle that was the folks from my old company. And then we had a couple of remote employees as well.
Gotcha. Um, and does Datadog have software engineers around the globe? Is there a concentration in the US or other markets?
Um, Around the globe for sure. I'd say the majority are in the US. And within the US, we're pretty New York focused, which is a little different than a lot of the other big tech companies that are on the West Coast.
Sure.
We don't
As
have a
opposed
huge.
to, San Jose, Silicon Valley focused.
Right, exactly. I go out to SF like every other month or so to keep in touch with folks out there in the startup community, but we don't have a huge engineering presence there ourselves. And then we have a pretty large presence across Europe.
Gotcha. What? So you've worked at a lot of companies on cutting edge AI projects. What are some brutal lessons you've learned along the way?
Yeah. One of the big ones for me, and one that I try to impart on people who are starting to are getting started in applying AI projects, is evaluation. Kind of like testing for software, you can't really leave it to kind of after you launch to think about. And it's pretty common for AI projects in particular for people to like to build a quick demo and then they say, hey, this is pretty close, right? And the answer is usually no, it's not. You need to really figure out how do you evaluate it across a wide variety of data that you might get in, and you're working on a stochastic system, so you need to really understand what does it mean to test a stochastic system, how do we know if it's working well. And that's one of those hard truths that, like, it's very easy to stand something up in AI, it's very hard to make it production ready, let's say.
Gotcha. And how has that changed as a guy who's been working in AI and ML for the past 15 plus years? How have the past 3 years changed things in your world with, as although LLMs have been around for a long time, as OpenAI and others started becoming mainstream here 2, 3 years ago? How has that changed your world?
Yeah, it's been an incredible time. I think there are a few things that changed. One of them is actually one of the reasons I was able to do a startup. Um, for a long time, I thought that machine learning can only be done by large companies because you needed so much money to get that initial model built. I, priced it out one time for a startup that I wanted to do years ago, and I was like, okay, we're going to need a minimum of a couple $1 million just for building the model. And that's not even like paying people. And especially back then, you weren't going to go get a seed or a pre-seed when you're pre-product for more than a couple $1 million. And so you'd burn all that money right away on just building the model, even if the product that you're trying to build doesn't work. OpenAI and others like them have made it so that a startup like my old one, or anyone today, or even within a 0 to 1 project within a new company, can get started very fast. You can take an existing foundation model. You could even take an open source model and do a little fine tuning. You can do it for cheap, and you can get moving quickly. So you can try out your ideas, validate your ideas faster than you used to be able to. It's still very hard to get that last, 10, 20% to get to production, and still terribly expensive and timely sometimes. But getting that first iteration going, which is what you need for new product. You don't know if what you're building is going to work. You know, people are going to like what you have. You can kind of show them something interesting and get moving.
So you had very secure, cutting edge jobs at big tech, and you jumped out on your own. How was that journey for you? I don't know if you guys had to raise initial seed money or initial early stage money. How was that transition for you?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm very much a 0 to 1 person. And so even within the big companies, I pretty much always worked on new projects, and I purposely tended to move to new projects whenever I felt that the one I was working on had got to a plateau, or at least got to like scale. Alexa is a good example of this. I was a big fan of the early days. And then once we were like, okay, things are somewhat working, we have a large team now, I moved to a new effort because for me, I don't really do the like at scale as much. And so that's one of the reasons why when I had a couple kind of pain points I really wanted to work on for developers, and I was talking to my buddy who eventually became my co-founder about it, we decided, hey, we'd like to do this as a startup rather than just trying to do it within a company. And that transition was actually less painful, other than the fact that I had to basically take a huge pay cut to do than I would have thought. We did end up raising a couple $1 million in a seed, around $2 million, but that was the only raise we did. We did that pre-product so that we can have enough money to pay a couple employees and do some model testing.
I've been involved in a lot of ventures. I've raised tens of millions, if not more, of investment capital for my ventures. And every time I do it, it's always a bigger pain in the butt than the next. And whether you're doing a small amount or a larger amount, and that was a new challenge for you. How did you guys, and obviously you have the CV, the experience to show your expertise, but raising capital is tough. Did you guys get outside help? How did you guys get over that hurdle?
We did get a little outside help. I had a few friends who had done startups before, and then I also worked with, if you know Madrona in Seattle, they're a big VC in Seattle. They're most well known probably because they invested in Amazon a long time ago.
Yeah. Which
So
makes them geniuses.
yeah, exactly. Did quite well on that one for sure. I was also part of their like early stage little like kind of accelerator-ish program. And part of that was I wanted to learn a little bit more of that. What does it mean to raise capital from VCs? Get guidance, things like that. But really, the end of the day, the like big thing was people just kept telling me it's painful You're going to do a lot of meetings. You should be okay with that. You're going to hear no a ton, and you should just be comfortable with that. So I probably did like 50-ish meetings, which I thought was painful, but there's people who tell me that they do a lot more than that. So I'll take it.
I think that's an average week for me, but hey. Um, and were you guys actively trying to sell? Were you approached? How did that come into play? And if you can't talk about it, that's okay too.
I can talk a little bit about it. Largely, we were looking at, so one of the things that my goal was always to build a large company, maybe build a public company, but we weren't seeing the traction that we wanted. And one of the issues at the time was that we were building DevOps tools for within a company, machine learning tools in particular. And especially a few years ago, even a year ago, people were less comfortable with running machine learning models inside of their company's data right away, looking at their logs, looking at their metrics, everything like that. So we're having a hard time getting within companies. A lot of engineers would say, yes, I'd like to use this, but we can't get approval to use it within the company. So we were trying to partner with companies that had that kind of data and had that visibility already. And you can imagine Datadog is one of those companies that already has that kind of visibility. So it started as kind of just a conversation to chat with and see if there's a way to partner. And we very quickly realized like, oh, actually, they're trying to work into the space a bit. They are looking for people who kind of know more about the space. I would classify us almost as more of an acqui-hire because they were looking for the people who had this kind of expertise who can come on and help. And that was kind of where it went.
Gotcha. And that term acqui-hire is definitely a big one right now. That's how big tech's acquiring top talent right now. So well, thank you for sharing that. Now, so I mean, your job is AI. This is what you do. Do you focus on using it internally, externally, both?
A bit of both. My main, if I have to rank my single priority is to make it so that our customers can get more out of what's happening in the AI space. So that's external. But I would say a very close secondary is helping keep people up to speed within the company. I write an internal weekly newsletter that goes out to a lot of our engineers and scientists who subscribe to it. I do a lot of hiring, a lot of helping people kind of understand what they could be doing, and partner with a lot of our other teams that are doing great work focused just on internal developer experience and kind of using AI to augment. So a bit of both.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And certainly in the observability world, you're dealing with huge data volumes. How do you balance real-time insights with cost efficiency with that much data?
Yeah, it is complicated. And we've been doing some types of machine learning for a long time, far before me, anomaly detection, that kind of thing, where you do want to keep models up to date. You want to figure out when there's new things coming out. And the earlier ways to balance that used to be maybe we kind of have a set process that runs in the background, once a week or so, or with smaller models. Now that we're trying to do a lot more automation with LLMs, that does get a bit more complicated because you can have an LLM running. You can't have an LLM run for every little piece of data that would come through. That'd be terribly expensive. So really, first we try to focus on what are the tasks that we think are worth solving for customers, which that's things that engineers already do. That's things like going and debugging error that came out or an alert, security issues, a few other things like that that are very high price, high value. And then really trying to build systems that do that well and trying to bring the cost of building those systems in line with what we think we can charge for it, what we think it's worth to customers. And I'd say we haven't perfected that yet, but a lot of it is make it work really well first and then figuring out how to optimize it after.
Gotcha. All right. So I want to bring up my opinion on how I've seen AI involve within the software engineering world. And you don't have to agree with me. I want your input. You look at Elon Musk went in and bought Twitter, fired 80% of the staff. Berg has been bullish on AI, saying that within 5 years, he'll be able to get rid of 60% of his engineering team. And it's my vantage point that the industry's been trying to figure out what AI is doing for software engineering. And in my opinion, reality has set in over the last couple months that AI is not replacing software engineers. And I want to caveat that. It's bringing tools for efficiency, it's evolving the roles, and it's definitely not, it's, if any positions, it might be eliminating our junior ones, but that's kind of what I've seen in the market. And we're often seeing companies, and MIT had a report last month that 95% of AI projects are failing and having negative ROI. What's your viewpoint on all this? Do you agree with my vantage point on that? Do you disagree?
I'm saying I would mix, disagree on some things, agree on some things. So I agree that today,
What are you, an attorney? No, I'm kidding.
I agree that today we are not we're not changing our hiring. I'd say like most companies are not changing their hiring significantly due to AI tools and automations that are happening right now. There may be some changes to the junior engineer hiring, like you mentioned, but I think even that is more of an economic indicator that has nothing to do with AI. That's more just companies are not growing because the market is a bit fuzzy and we don't really know where things are going. Um,
Very, very fair point.
yeah. I do, however, think that there are large number of startups that are staying smaller longer because they feel they can get more done with the tools that they have. And I think that that is actually the big change that's happening today. And it's not just startups. Within big companies, I do think there are also new teams, smaller teams that are staying small pods rather than just hiring right away when they have a need because they can get more done by augmenting themselves with AI. I would also say we're at the very beginning of the J curve. Like just the amount of change I've seen in the last year or two for Codex, for Claude, for a variety of these kind of tools, I don't think we should kind of snapshot where we're at and assume that it's going to be linear growth from here. I think that we are accelerating, and I think things are changing faster and faster every year, every month. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Dario from Anthropic is right that we're getting close to having like 80 to 90% of code written by AI systems over time in the next year or so. It's very hard to gauge, but I think things are changing very fast.
Gotcha. What are some of the favorite AI tools used by your team?
Right now, I would say it is definitely Cursor. Cursor is used just across the board by many, many people, my team, other teams that I know. And the nice thing about Cursor is you can swap out the model that's underlying. So Cursor just replaces your IDE, and you can go and decide I'm going to use Claude, I'm going to use OpenAI's models, I'm going to use whoever's out there. A close second is certainly Codex. I think OpenAI is getting better and better with Codex every day. If you had asked me this a month ago, I would have said Anthropic has this kind of like just close. They're doing a great job. It's done. But we're in this great situation where people
Somebody
keep swapping
does a
back and
new
forth.
feature and all of a sudden, they're back.
Exactly. So I love it from a user point of view. I wouldn't want to be in one of those companies trying to compete with the other because they're just going to keep trading off who's in charge. But from someone who applies their models and applies their systems and uses their tools, it's an incredible time because they keep driving down costs. They keep bringing out new things. They're really pushing each other to better heights.
And before the show, you were talking about a tool, your own Datadog Bits AI agents. What is that?
Yeah, Bits.ai is a series of agents. I think of it as a team of agents that does work for you and kind of puts on, a coworker hat. So one of them is the Bits.ai SRE. So what do your SREs do? An alert goes off. They go off and start trying to figure out what's going on in your system, look at your logs, your metrics, your traces, all that kind of stuff. We have one agent that just does that. And then we have another one that's the Bits.ai security analyst, who you see something weird in your security logs, it'll go off and kind of run your runbook just like a human would. And a lot of the goal is to be a proactive and asynchronous assistant. That's what Bits AI is for us. Is this assistant that I can kind of talk to like it's a teammate. I don't have to go and like always kick it off. So a lot of the current, I'd say this is also how a lot of things are changing in AI. A lot of the current AI systems are these chat assistants that you have to like go and tell it what to do. A lot of our goal is how do we not just be a chat assistant? How do we go and get triggered by something that is happening in your system that we can go off and try a bunch of things before you even get to your computer? And that's what Bits AI does for you. Bits AI over time will capture more and more tasks. And we even will be working on ways to make it so that any developer or DevOps person in your company can decide they want to add a new task custom or like take something that they know how to do and teach it to Bits. And then Bits can go off and do it for them in the future.
Gotcha. Very cool. What are some AI tools that are coming out that you're keeping your eye on or curious about?
Largely, I've been trying to keep an eye on anything in the MCP tooling space. So there are, I don't want to kind of pick a favorite here, but there are a number of companies here that are doing what I think of as bringing MCP to enterprise because MCP is this new API layer, let's say, that's for AI systems, the model context protocol that came out from Anthropic initially. But if you're trying to give a tool that any assistant within any company can use, it also needs to be secure. It also needs to be something that can be used in a way that's trustworthy. And no one's really solved that yet. So there's a variety of startups, like 6 probably from YC alone, that are coming out with ways to make it this easier to use, easier to consume, things like that. Also, just from a like personal point of view, I love to use a lot of Google's new like image generation work. like Nano Banana for my own projects. I have a 2-year-old son, so I make him like custom coloring books all the time
Nice.
that are, just take the pictures that he has and ask the model to go and take these pictures and turn them into kind of coloring book pictures. Works quite well.
Interesting. Diamond, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. You've definitely had an impressive career. You're still a young guy. I'm sure lots of great things to come. Before we wrap, what's your no BS advice for tech leaders out there who are trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these interesting times?
Yeah, go and be hands-on. There are a large number of tech leaders who don't kind of use the tools themselves anymore, and they just tell their teams to do it. The best leaders out there are in founder mode, I'd say, being hands-on, keeping flat organizations, and really working alongside their teams.
Awesome. Great advice, Diamond. Thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, well, we'll just share it with your competitors. Might be the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.